Welcome to the Does This Happen to You podcast, where we explore the funny side of truth is stranger than fiction stories. Our story this week is from Misty Ray, who you'll find on Medium.com, and here is Making the Big Bucks from Infidelity, How I Profited Off My Father's Assignations. Hush money's nothing new. I was involved in my own payment for silence racket way back in the 80s, decades before Donald Trump had lawyers paying off porn stars. I was a horrible kid. I'm aware of that. And you're likely going to think I was worse than horrible by the time you reach the end of this story. Blackmail was nothing new to me. I was practically born and raised on it. I extorted a television and cable for my room from my father as a toddler for my silence regarding a fight he got in at Kmart. So when the opportunity to profit from Daddy's misdeeds presented itself to me a few years later, you bet your sweet ass I took advantage. Full advantage. My parents were very unhappily married, but due to religious conviction and some twisted sense of staying together for the child, refused to separate. I even begged them to get divorced on more than one occasion. My mother was, looking back, obviously mentally ill. She could be very cold and uncaring. She could be downright mean and nasty, to me and to my father. One way she expressed her cold nature was to deny my father any physical affection at all. "We've had the one child and you'll get nothing more off me," was what she'd say every time he leaned in for a hug or kiss. That one child was my brother, and he was born in the mid-1950s. You can imagine how my father coped with that. My father was an exceptionally handsome man, the very embodiment of the phrase tall, dark, and handsome, and he was charming to boot. Women loved him, and he liked the ladies. I suspect he'd been entertaining female company outside his marriage for quite some time, but I never, ever had concrete proof. What I did have was just enough circumstantial evidence to turn a tidy profit. I was just old enough to start going to the local mall with my friends, without adult supervision. I was also becoming interested in things like clothes, makeup, and records. My $5 a week allowance wasn't nearly enough to cover my needs, and I was too young to get a job, other than babysitting, and at $1 an hour, that $40 pair of red-tabbed Levi's would have taken eons to get. There was only one mall in town. My dad did our grocery shopping there. He also spent many hours sitting, sipping on Coke, chatting with people at the cafe adjacent to the supermarket. Sometimes his companions were old army buddies or current co-workers. Sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were women. The first time I caught him sitting with a woman, I could see they knew each other quite well. They were sort of leaning into each other across the table. I approached them. I'd already intended to approach him anyway. Woman or no woman, I wanted a few dollars. When Daddy saw me, he jolted upright, stammered, and looked like a giant kid whose hand was caught in the cookie jar. He hastily introduced me to the woman as his daughter and handed me a crisp, green $20 bill. Ka-ching! His only condition was, don't tell Mom he was there. A business was born. Over the ensuing weeks and months, I began timing my mall visits to coincide with when I figured he'd be most likely to be there. It became obvious that how much money he was willing to fork over was directly proportional to his level of guilt. Sometimes I'd get $5 or maybe $10, but when the woman was younger, thin, and white, pay dirt, that was at least $20. I never did tell. You may wonder why. I know it sounds heartless. How could a child who, on some level, must have known better, not tell their mother about this? And how could a child take it a step further and take money from the adulterer? Where was my loyalty? Well, first, and quite honestly, at 11, 12, 13 years old, my loyalty was to me, myself, and I. I didn't have much of an ability to see much beyond my own nose. Second, my loyalty was to my daddy, the only parent I felt loved me at the time. At the time, my mother and I had a rough relationship. She'd made it very clear several times that she preferred my brother to me, that she never wanted to adopt me and felt forced into it. She'd told me countless times how much she hated me and threatened routinely to send me to the home for bad girls, whatever that was. Don't get me wrong, she had good in her too. She always had my back with the school and outsiders. She could be funny, and she taught me some of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned. Those things just didn't outweigh the bad stuff. The truth was, I felt no loyalty from her and felt no loyalty to her in my youthful heart. Looking back now, I've asked myself if I feel bad and if I do it differently now. Probably not. I can't go back to the person I was then. 40 years is a long time, and I'm not the same little girl. And no, I don't feel bad for not telling her. I doubt it would have served any useful purpose if I had. There would have been more fighting, more yelling, and nothing else. She wouldn't have left. He wouldn't have left. Her because, among her many reasons, she didn't believe in divorce. Him because he was terrified to lose me, because he believed the courts would automatically side with the mother on custody matters. And as much as I sometimes despised her, I also loved her. I didn't want to tell her something that would hurt her. It wasn't my job to deal with my parents' marriage. Morally, I do struggle with my actions a bit. They don't sit neatly, you know. Not my finest hour or hours. But when I found myself caught between a rock and a hard place, I squeezed the rock and shook out the coins. I did what I did. And those red-tabbed Levi's looked amazing on me. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Kepler, and I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories as much as I enjoyed narrating them. I'd love for more people to hear these wonderful stories, so please share and tell your friends.